Hello, everyone. It's Larry Kotlikoff back with Economics Matters, and I'm here with my longtime friend and uh, one of our country's top uh, writers, Larry Leamer, Laurence Leamer, who's out with a new book 8 days from now, which is called Andy Warhol's Muses. It's called Warhol's Muses, and Muses is about your kind of followers, people that hang your people that adhere to you, that you in many ways are using potentially to improve your uh, place in life or your station in life for commercial reasons. So this is about Andy Warhol, Warhol's Muses, and uh, it's about 10 women who Warhol attached himself to, or they attached themselves to Warhol. And Larry's going to tell us all about the book, but this is not his first rodeo. Larry's had 20 books. 6 of them have been New York Times bestsellers. And Larry and I have known each other since roughly I think 1977. I went out to UCLA after grad school to be a postdoc um, at the Department of Economics at UCLA with Larry's brother Ed, and Ed introduced me to Larry. Tragically, Ed passed away just recently. There's a fantastic. He was a brilliant, one of the top economists ever. Made fantastic contributions to economics, far beyond what the public knows, but even what most economists understand. But it's reverberated through the years, his fantastic contribution to our profession. And we had a beautiful tribute with 3 Nobel Prize winners and many other economists that he, right before he passed, to discuss his work. There's a obituary in the Wall Street Journal on the 14th of March, which is entitled. Let me just pull it up here a second to get the right title. It's called Edward Leamer, economist who said economists were doing it wrong, dies at 80. So if you're not an economist, but you're interested in economics, which almost everybody is, you should go read this op-ed in the Wall Street Journal about Edward Leamer, March 14th. And you will learn that much of what the best economists are trying to change the field for the better and look at what we're doing and say, and are very honest if we're doing it wrong, and come out and radically reform what we're doing. So that's what science is about, and economics is a science. But today we're here to celebrate yet another fantastic Leamer. There are 3 Leamer brothers, Robert Leamer, as well as Larry and Ed. And Robert's fantastic and has had a fantastic profession in his own right. But Larry has an extraordinary career. You don't write 20 books and be a 6 times New York bestseller. And his most recent book before this current one, it's called Capote's Women, about Truman Capote's his muses. And it was transformed into a Hulu 8-part series. Listen to the list of top stars who were part of this series, which won 11 Emmy Award nominations. There was Naomi Watts, Diane Lane, Alyssa Flockhart, Tom Hollander. All these people and others were starring in this 8-part series that you can now watch at your leisure on Hulu. And it's all about Larry's, it's all from Larry's book. It's the same title, and Capote's Women. But Larry has written on such a variety of topics that depends on what you're interested in. You are going to find a book that by Laurence Leamer that's a fantastic read and is going to just teach you an enormous amount. Let me just kind of cite some of the books that he's written about. He's written about the Kennedy women, the Kennedy men. He's written about Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's written about Johnny Carson. These are major uh, uh, books, biographies, uh, or just discussions of these very important people. The life of Nancy and Ronald Reagan. Uh, there's a book called The Reagans Make Believe. Uh, King of the Night. That's the life of Johnny Carson. Uh, but then there's other books. I'm going to stop and let Larry talk a little bit about the other books and how he got to become. And this is not his first rodeo in writing books, but it's also not his first rodeo on Economics Matters, the podcast. He was here uh, when he came out with Capote's Women to tell us about that book. But we have many, many new subscribers to Economics Matters. So, Larry, just try and give us a quick background on how you went from Antioch College uh, to working in the Peace Corps in Nepal to ending up becoming, then getting into journalism and then becoming writing for the New York Times, uh, New York Playboy, for the Washingtonian, and working in a coal mine, and then ending up as one of our country's top uh, authors, because you don't write 20 books, period, and you don't write 6 bestsellers out of those 20, and the other ones that aren't bestsellers should be. Larry, take it away a little bit, okay?
Well, when I went to Nepal in the Peace Corps, it was the best 2 years of my life in the mountains in a village, 2 days walk on a road, fabulous time. I came back and I had a fellowship in international development at the University of Oregon. It bored me to death. And just as a fluke, the second year, I took a course in magazine writing. Okay. And I talked my way into George Wallace's airplane. His first, he's running for president in '68, his first trip to the North. And I spent a week with him on the plane. I sent an article in Cold.
Not on the plane, but off the plane. You mean back and forth on the plane?
I was on the plane with him for a week.
You went back on different trips
No, no, he was flying across the West, and I flew with him.
for a whole week?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the flight didn't take a week, right?
Yeah, he's flying from city to city.
Oh, I see. Okay. Different flights. Okay, got it. Yeah.
San Francisco, uh, San Diego, whatever. I went with him. I went with him all that time, and I submitted an article to the New Republic. I didn't know anybody there. I just sent it in cold, and they published it. And I thought, wow, this is better than graduate school. And I then wrote for a student magazine. I interviewed Bobby Kennedy just a couple of weeks before he died. I got a fellowship to the Columbia School of Journalism. I ended up in second in my class. I got a job for Newsweek. Big mistake, the worst experience of my life. I was fired after a year, and I'd read this book, Nighttime Comes to Cumberland, so Kentucky. I thought Appalachia sounded fabulous, fascinating. I went down there. I didn't know anybody. I knew one friend who had a furniture store in Beckley, West Virginia. I went to see him, and he said, if you want to learn about Appalachia, you should work in a coal mine. So the next, made a couple phone calls, and the next day I was working in a coal mine. So that was a great experience. And I wrote about it for Harper's Magazine. I didn't do it in the first person because I thought, listen, you're in there, you're spending a couple months in the mine. These people are spending their lives. Don't promote yourself. Write about their lives. So I did that, and that led to all kinds of magazine assignments. I covered the war in Bangladesh, and I started writing books. And it was a struggle. It was very lean for many years, and I've become successful and very lucky.
So, are there any books I didn't mention all the books? Tell us any books that I didn't mention that you would like to have mentioned because people may have other interests. You said you wrote a book about Willie Ensel.
Yeah, Willie Unsold climbed Everest in 1963, and he was the Peace Corps director when I was there. He was an incredibly fascinating man, And Ascent is a story of him. It's a tragic story about his obsession taking risks to become an adult, and how it led to his daughter's death and death of some of his students. But that Robert Redford came to my house and wanted to make a movie out of it, but the screenplays weren't any good.
Hmm. Okay. Well, so but you've also, not only have you written about these very famous people, but from what you've just said and from what I know, you've been interacting with uh, people that would be called stars, in the sense that, they're household names, people like
Well,
Robert.
if you want to write the truth about people, you have to get close to them. When I was writing my book about, the Kennedy women, I was writing that. The Kennedys, you write them letters, they wouldn't answer letters. You call them, they wouldn't respond. So I got interested in Special Olympics. And with the International Special Olympic Games were being held in Minneapolis. I went there. Here's a limo with Eunice Kennedy Shriver and her husband Sarge Shriver. And Sarge Shriver had been the director of the Peace Corps, so I had a little bit of in with him. I just got in the car. I didn't ask. If I'd asked, I would have said no. I just got in the car and spent the whole week with them and riding around with them. And that was my entree to her. And through her, I got to all the other Kennedys.
And then you got in the court, you just opened the door, sat down, and what did you say?
Just sat there, didn't say anything. If I said anything, they would have kicked me out. And when I tell this story now, it sounds kind of crazy. What an idiot. But for whatever reason, it
You
worked.
pretend you were the driver or something?
No, I just sat there.
You just sat there and then they asked you who you are?
They knew who I was, but they just didn't say anything. And there I was. And I became close to Mrs. Shriver. Mrs. Shriver became a good friend, but not in the end, because Herb Kramer was her PR guy, wonderful person. And he told me the story. Mrs. Shriver was very much pro-life, and she was a leader in the country. And they were having one of their meetings one day, and they started talking about birth control. Well, being a good Catholic woman, Mrs. Shriver had never seen a condom. She thought that men strapped on a condom when they're going out at night to be ready, okay? And I thought that was such an incredible story. And when I wrote my book about Arnold Schwarzenegger, Maria Shriver, these women were totally asexual. They're good Catholic women of their time. They weren't supposed to like sex. They're only supposed to do it to have children. And Maria, I mean, imagine if Arnold Schwarzenegger, the young Arnold Schwarzenegger came knocking on your door to go out with your daughter. You wouldn't be too happy, would you? So, but Maria was just sexually obsessed with him, and that was the first sexual woman in the Kennedy family. And so I told that story in my biography of Arnold, and Mrs. Shriver was not happy. She ran into me in the street one day, and she put me down, and she never talked to me again.
Just, well, if you tell the truth, you're going to make people unhappy sometimes. So that's the lesson to be learned here. Let's talk about retirement for a minute. It's something Americans think about regularly. Ask yourself, how financially secure do you really feel? Do you have enough money to retire? How much is really enough? And if you don't have enough money, how can you possibly find that extra money before you do retire? These are all tough questions. My retirement software, Maxify Planner, is the powerful online planning tool that takes the guesswork out of retirement. It weighs your assets against your fixed expenses to calculate how much you can safely spend every year for the rest of your life based on when you decide to retire. And it shows you safe ways to find more money. Maxify makes a complicated problem like retirement planning simple. It's accurate, easy to use, and produces what you really seek, peace of mind. So make the smart choice and visit Maxify.com today. Don't miss this opportunity. That's Maxify with an I, Maxify, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast. Let's talk about Warhol's Muses. Let's first of all show everybody the book. It's got a fantastic cover.
It's got a beautiful cover, great cover.
Yeah, and who's the picture? Who's the
Edie Sedgwick. She's the best known of all the Muses.
Edie Sedgwick.
Sedgwick. And she's a subject of a classic book about the 60s, Edie, by it was Jean Stein was an heiress, and she spent 5 years traveling all around the country doing interviews and having them transcribed, and not just about Edie, but about the whole cultural ambiance. But she couldn't write the book. And George Clinton came in and did an incredible job turning it into an oral history. That's one of the great works about the 60s. And those documents all sit in the New York Public Library. And I spent a week there taking with my iPhone, taking pictures of those interviews. And that's one of the key elements in my book.
So a lot of people, are viewing this are probably in their, 40s and 30s and maybe 50s. And of course, the 60s are a long way away. And, so they don't know who George Wallace was, that he was this incredibly, what he, at least it came across to the country as this incredibly racist governor from what was the Mississippi, who was
Alabama.
Alabama. It was segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever was his speech, I guess. One of his famous, he said in one of his famous speeches. And so you've been able to talk to people that personally despise their politics, but you thought it was important to know what they're really like and whether they were putting on a show just to get elected. Uh, just a,
Add Donald Trump to that list.
yeah. So just a quick question, is that your take on George Wallace? Because before we had despicable people, we had despicable people.
He was the Donald Trump of his age. He figured out what people needed. He understood that dark side of America, and he rode very high with it. Not as high as Donald Trump, but he rode high.
Yeah. And it didn't end up well for Wallace in the sense somebody shot him and he ended up in a wheelchair.
Right, right.
The
But
so
I hit it off with him partially because I, he we just I kind of had an affinity with the guy for some weird reason.
Mhm. Did you discuss his racism, or did you think it was
Just
all?
everything. I mean, I'm going to ask any question. I don't care if you want me to ask him or not. I'm going to ask it.
Uh, did he defend himself, or did he say, "Well, I'm not really that racist"?
He defended himself.
I see. So he was. So he just thought he was a.
He didn't think he was a racist. He just thought the racists should be separate.
I see. I got it.
That's how he thought it. The fact that in that situation the blacks were kept, in serfdom was irrelevant.
I got it. So anyway, the book about Warhol really goes into the '60s and about the fact that you're saying this is a very kind of a different times, a special times like the '30s and early '30s and in Berlin. There's a Netflix show called Babylon Berlin or Berlin Babylon, which is about the kind of the
I
roaring,
see
roaring
it. Right.
Berlin. Um, and you're saying that the '60s in New York and other, and Warhol was in New York, was culturally evolving in many, many directions. It was an extremely exciting time, but also a rebellious time. And that Warhol was kind of caught on to this and got in the middle of this. And so that's one part of what you're going to tell us about the book, I'm gathering. But the other part is that Warhol was the first person to commercialize art, to treat it as something just to make, in large part, to make money from, and that um, part of it's like the selling your something on the internet, some picture, something in a digital uh, a digital, what is it, an NFT that you could sell because other people think it's got value. You're saying to a large extent Warhol's paintings, his work, does not have artistic value, at least in terms of classical artistic value. It has commercial value because people believe in it. And then part of that is the artist making up a, uh, a story about himself to further the sale value of his NFT in effect.
It was about celebrity. Great artist. Picasso, when he was 90 years old, was still doing daring new work. Okay, all great artists have long careers. Warhol, his creative period, such as it was only 5 years in the early 60s. And what was it? You take a picture he saw in a book or a magazine or whatever, and he would use his silk screening process to blow it up, and then he'd colorize it. He was very good at that, and then slap it out. If it took 2 hours, I'd be surprised. And that's what that one of those paintings just sold 2 years ago for $195 million. Now, where's the little boy saying the emperor has no clothes?
So $195 for a picture,
$105 million.
$195 million for a painting of Elizabeth Taylor, and you're saying that he might have painted that or used a silkscreen process to produce that within 2 hours, is what you're saying.
I'm not saying maybe, I'm saying he did. I'm saying he took a picture from like a publicity still and used that and then colorized it. And that's his masterpiece, the most expensive painting in American history.
So you're saying that artistically speaking, this man was a fraud.
He's not a fraud. He was the perfect creature of the 1960s. He was a part of American pop culture. He was a genius of American pop culture. But in my way of thinking, he wasn't a great artist. Okay, his most recent biographer says that he compares him to Rembrandt and Da Vinci and all those. I don't think so. For 5 years, he only worked for 5 years. Then he came back after he was shot, and he did these portraits. You'd come to him, you'd give him $50,000. He'd take a Polaroid of your face, and he'd do the same thing with you and charge you $50,000, and you were happy because you had a Warhol. Wow.
Okay, tell us about his Warhol himself and how he got into this into the art world, how he became qualified to how people, his early years in New York. You said he had a basically some kind of a factory that he rented, a loft where he had people, all kinds of people.
That's the famous factory, the most famous art studio in American history. That's where they all came. But before that, he was this poor kid from Pittsburgh, from an Eastern European family, gay, soft and weak and uncomfortable. He comes to New York. He becomes a very successful commercial artist. I mean, I can, in my mind's eye, I can see some of the shoes, these beautiful drawings of shoes he did. But he wanted to do another kind of art. And he glommed on to pop art at the beginning, and he was brilliant at self-promotion. And he knew he called himself this ugly gay guy, and he knew that there were maybe 1,000 people in America who were collecting contemporary art, and he wanted to get to the homes of the wealthy where they might buy his art. He wasn't going to get invited to these parties, so he befriended these rich young women who could get him to those parties. He got to the parties. At first, he was totally ignored, but then he became more a celebrity. He's about celebrity. He's about the celebrity creation in the 60s. He didn't see the famous lines that he didn't say was that everybody's got 15 minutes of fame, but he thought that. And so he democratized celebrity and diminished it. And look, I wrote a book about Johnny Carson, and I had the book of Johnny Carson from the Tonight Show in the early years of the 60s. If I brought that book and we opened it up, you'd know two-thirds of those names, okay? You'd know they were famous people. Johnny Carson was in New York, and he realized that something, and he totally understood popular culture the way Andy Warhol did. And so he saw something was happening, and these people he'd have on his show, as brilliant as they often are, as fascinating, the audience wasn't buying into them. They wanted these mini celebrities who flashed in and out in a few months. So he went to L.A. because that's where those people were, and his show became even more successful because of that. But that's a trivialization of celebrity, and Warhol was about that.
I see. So true celebrity, you would say, requires somebody to do something real, something lasting, something important,
To
something.
accomplish something, but that's gone. The Kardashians are symbolic of that. It doesn't matter. You're just celebrity for itself.
Yeah. So we're kind of okay. So this world of fake celebrity, if you like, has been going on, I guess. Well, it goes back to the 60s. It's not just today, but it goes back probably forever,
No,
perhaps.
but that kind goes back to the 60s.
That
That's
kind
the emergence of this kind of new kind of flash in the pan celebrity. That's that it all began.
So what? So you're writing about 10 women who attach themselves, or he attaches to them, and then he uses them and discards them. Is that part of the story of the book?
Look, you talk about people in the 30s, not people in the 30s or 40 years old, not understanding this. Their children of the 60s were all children of the 60s. It was the most radical decade in terms of cultural change in American history. It was all about freedom. It was about people getting bored with traditional life, the traditional cultures, the elite, and wanting to get out of there. And Andy Warhol was there to greet these young women from these rich families.
And you have some things, I mean, in this loft, what they called the factory, which you said was kind of a really run down, and they had some kind of a couch you talk about in the first part of the book that should probably been, was found off the street, and who knows what was lying inside the couch. But you said people would come to these parties and they'd be packed, and there'd be some people deciding to have sex right on the couch in the middle of the party.
Exactly. While around them are famous people
Famous people, and this was somehow,
who get off coming to the factory. Wouldn't have done it 5 years before. They get off doing that. And the drugs. Drugs are ubiquitous. We think of the 60s as the era of marijuana and LSD. No, amphetamines. There were 8 to 10 billion tablets of amphetamine ingested each year. And who was the king of amphetamines in the 60s? President John F. Kennedy. He injected it himself.
so this is what we call speed, right?
Yes. And my two closest friends both were addicts. And one of them killed himself, and the other kind of went on crippled on in life. So I don't look at drug use with amusement or this kind of drug use.
I see. So you think it was some of what was going on was because people were high, and some of it was because this was like high times. This was,
Well, and also in terms of amphetamines, I mean, Warhol was making these movies. Like Chelsea Girls is the most famous movie. In all of these films, there are people shooting up amphetamine. Are there any bad consequences? Does anybody ever get sick? Does anybody die? No. They're a celebration of drugs. Young people watching these films will think, "Gee, I'm going to go do that." It's totally irresponsible and amoral.
and did Warhol himself use drugs?
Yeah, he used amphetamines. But like everything else, he was careful. He never was too much over the top.
I see. And so you said in this, how old was he at the point? And we're talking about the early 60s when he's 5 years of productivity. He's in the 30s. And then let's talk about some of the particular women as they come along here and what happens, kind of the meat of the book here, but also how he ends up getting shot. What happens there? And then at the end of his life, he shoots himself. He kills himself, right?
No, he doesn't.
Oh, okay. I got that wrong. Okay, I thought
That operation that went bad.
when an operation that went bad. I got it. And what age did he die?
What?
How old was he when he died?
I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, all right. But so tell us about the content of the book, about some of the women and his relationship with them.
Well, it goes through these 10 women in their lives and what's happened to them. And, they're addicts, most of them, they have all kinds of trouble. It begins with the story of Baby Jane Holzer. She was a Jewish heiress, okay? And I say Jewish importantly because, interestingly enough, at the factory, they were all fallen Catholics. They were all Catholics. I mean, isn't that interesting? You think to be talks to artistic people being Jewish, you think there'd be somebody Jewish or not, but there weren't. They were Catholic. In fact, I didn't put this in the book, but there was an element of anti-Semitism in a lot of them. But anyway, Baby Jane was Jewish. And she was from a very wealthy East Side family. And Andy glommed onto her because that was going to be the advice to get him to all these fancy parties. And Tom Wolfe, the brilliant, amazing Tom Wolfe, who I don't share conservative politics, but nobody understood that era better than Tom Wolfe. So many of his pieces are immortal. And he wrote a piece about her called the Girl of the Year, which is kind of mocking her, satirizing. And that's what Tom Wolfe did. Some people didn't get it was satire, but it was. And so she was the first of these Kardashian types. She was all over the news, all over the media, all over the gossip columns for nothing. She didn't do anything. She wasn't particularly smart. She wasn't particularly creative, but she was just there because she was a celebrity. And in the end, the celebrity, what it does is it raises you up, and then when it's through with you, it just knocks you out. Suddenly, she was out of the paper. She stripped her clothes. She did anything to get attention, and no longer it worked. So she and her husband go and they buy the greatest house on Long Island, the DuPont house, and they're supposed to be these extremely wealthy people, but they don't pay their mortgage, and they're kicked out of the house. And the last day, she goes with her minions and takes everything, takes all the fixtures. The DuPonts had beautiful things, took the doorknobs off, took the glass, and walked off with that. And her husband at that time had left and gone to California.
So what happens to her over time?
She now lives in Palm Beach, and Palm Beach, she has a lot of Warhol paintings. She's rich for that alone. She owns half of large parts of Worth Avenue, and Worth Avenue these days it's one art gallery after another. Is it because these people have this incredible artistic instinct and love for art? No, because it became a primary investment. It's probably one of the most successful investment of all in the last 20 years. But it's not about art. It's not for love of art for most of them. They could care less.
I see. Did you actually interview her as part of this?
She wouldn't talk to me.
Okay.
And people say, you know what? Why don't you talk to somebody? You don't talk to somebody because you're afraid they know things that you don't want to have out. And that definitely was the case with me.
I see. So what was her relationship exactly with Warhol? Was she, I mean, did this go on for years or did it go on for
She was her claim to fame is she was the only one who didn't strip naked in his films. She kept her clothes on. I mean, she did a lot of kind of things that are very sexual, and what kind you read in the book, you're kind of stunned that people could do this and talk this way, but she did, and she was always on. She didn't like the people around him. She thought they were kind of sick, and she tried to distance herself.
Want more money, less risk, and a better life? Buy Money Magic, a new book by Laurence, Boston University economist, personal finance expert, and best-selling author. Whether it's education, career, marriage, housing, investing, retirement, Social Security, IRA, or 401k decisions, Money Magic delivers scores of secrets to raise your living standard. Financial journalist Jane Bryant Quinn says Money Magic is a must-read. Nobel laureate George Akerlof says Money Magic is quite probably the best financial advice book ever written. Financial guru John Malden says, you'll love this amazing book. It's full of wit, wisdom, and startling paths to a better financial life. And columnist Scott Burns calls Money Magic a funny, brilliant read, offering wildly powerful, unconventional choices that can literally change your life. Get Laurence Kotlikoff's Money Magic today at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent booksellers.
And would these parties at the factory be happening every week or every day, or what was
Not
it?
every, but it was one party. People were constantly coming in and out, and he liked that. He kept his distance. He was a voyeur, absolute voyeur. Early on in the book, he attends this orgy in Greenwich Village, but he doesn't take part. He just sits on the edge and watches the people doing it. And somebody says, you're going to partake or get out of here. And he left.
I see. And where's he actually doing his artwork, if you want to call it exactly that? Where's he
In the factory.
in the factory, some part of it? Okay.
Yeah, on the floor. On the floor.
On the floor drawing and everybody else is around there, or he's just working on his
Yeah,
own?
he'd bring in a bunch of people to help him do it often.
Well, so you're saying one of the questions you're raising is whether or not um, he actually did some of this work that is being sold now for hundreds of millions of dollars.
He didn't do a lot of it. No question about it.
I see. It's his assistants or his friends.
Yeah. Gerard Malanga, who I became friends with, he was he was the first assistant. He talked about how he did. He may have done that painting that went for $195 million. And it's a measure of just how selfish Andy was. These people who did so much, did he give them a painting? Are they rich now? No.
I see. Now, my understanding is that these 10 women were kind of used by Warhol and then discarded uh, in much the way I guess the Capote used women and got at the end his women were very close friends with him, but then when he started writing about them and revealing what he thought was the truth about them, they became they turned on him
Right.
and wouldn't let him in the door. Uh, is that kind of a similar type of story here?
He needed them, he used them, but that was the way with everybody. He was totally friendless. Ultimately, he was friendless. You wouldn't think that. And he went out every night to parties. That was it. Every night. That's what he did.
I see.
Very shrewd guy. He understood the 60s better than the cultural and political rallies. He understood the dark side of it so perfectly and what was going to happen.
Okay. So uh, are these women coming along serially? Or are they all at the same time or what?
Generally, serially, but some of them are there at the same time.
And they would hang out for a year or so with him or 6 months or
It depended. I mean, uh, uh, yeah, it depended. Bridget Berlin was with him for many, many, many years. She didn't leave.
Mhm. And were these all these women very famous at the time? I mean, you said Baby Jane was a celebrity even before she met Warhol, I guess because of her background or something, or
No, for
no?
no reason at all, because she had a kind of look people liked, and they liked to put her in the gossip columns. But she was a fairly talentless person.
I see. So she was just attractive in a certain way, and then she started interacting and kind of uh, expanded that attraction through having other people speak about her.
And
Uh,
another thing that happened in egalitarian America, I remember in Washington to see the style section, okay, which was the most, that was the comic page for the elite. You'd read that and you'd think, gosh, if I could only get to that party, if I could only get there, I would have a real life. And that's what so much of this stuff is about. It's about envy.
I see. That's a yeah useful yeah I guess the reason people are attracted to it is because they wish they had been at the party.
Right, right.
They hadn't been invited and
It's usually better in the telling than in the reality.
yeah. Um, so how does Warhol get shot? This is one of his muses that shoots him, right?
No, she's not. She's
Oh,
a
no,
radical lesbian and a
she's what?
brilliant, a radical lesbian, Valerie Solanas, radical lesbian, brilliant woman, couldn't wanted to have her manuscript published, her treatise, and had a play she wanted to have produced, and he had no interest in it. And she thought, gee, if I shoot somebody famous, kill somebody famous, I get my play produced. So she showed up one day and shot him and a couple other people there in the factory, and he almost died.
She shot him in the stomach or something.
Yeah.
And so she was insane. I guess she goes off to jail forever, or is that?
Actually, only for a couple of years. That was really not right. Only a couple of years, and then she died in a welfare hotel in San Francisco a few years later.
Hmm. What about these other women? How did they fare after their interaction with Warhol? Is this like, it sounds like Baby Jane had a had a terrible time for a while and then landed back on her feet through maybe
But
taking the new.
she's about, Bridget Berlin. Her father was the head of Hearst, okay, and she hated him. She hated her parents. She had nothing to do with them, and she was a very heavy addict. Okay, I mean, can't believe how heavy that addict she was, but in the end, she got out of it and became totally right wing, and would spend her days lying in bed watching Fox News, which is a terrible penance as far as I'm concerned.
I see. But she's still with
No,
us.
she died, but she lived. She lived, to very much an old age. She did okay. Uh, uh, Viva Viva came from upstate New York. She was Catholic, and she was She was a fascinating woman, and she's still alive, and she lives in Palm Springs, California.
And what was her, how did she end up coming into his orbit?
Max's Kansas City was the restaurant in those years, okay? And there was a back room. And that was the place to be. It's funny because I went to Antioch College, okay? And Antioch College was the most liberal school in America in the 60s. No fraternities, no closed social institutions. But it was the most snobbish place I've ever been in my life, okay? Because there weren't those institutions. I sat at a table, like six of us. We thought we were the artists, okay? That was our college. We didn't want to talk to anybody else. So it was so this bohemian scene was incredibly snobbish. And in Max's Kansas City, in the back room, that's where Andy was at this one table, the captain's table. Boy, you didn't dare walk in there unless you were invited. The front row was for all the losers and wannabes. And that's where Viva was. She wanted to be an artist, this tall, beautiful woman. And she connected with Andy and started hanging out with him. And it was in his films and was really a fine actress. In these films, he would just make these films in a few days. He didn't care. And they were pornographers, semi-pornographers. I mean, after Andy was shot, okay, you'd think, gosh, I've been almost killed. I've got to do really serious work now. I've got to show my life is worthwhile. So what does he do? He makes a movie that he wanted to call Fuck, but they ended up calling it Blue Movie. It's Viva and this other guy having sex for 2 hours, and the guy leaves his socks on. He's having sex with his socks on. Well, being the intrepid investigator I am, I had to watch that film. And the one place I could see was the Library of Congress. They take me down this dark labyrinth to this court in this little tiny room and turn it on. Here I'm watching sex. I think I'm going to be arrested or somebody's going to come out and do something more. But that's what art was like.
So I guess we might look forward to the day when these movies are tossed out by our current administration from the Library of Congress. I mean, not
But that was the top of the list, believe me.
Yeah, yeah. So and the other, so what happens to her? Does she leave his orbit at some point?
Eventually, eventually, she marries and heads to California.
Were
But
any
had a great role with him.
did they stay friends, or did they just kind of break
No,
off?
he didn't stay friends with people. He was funny. From 1966 on, when the first cassette reporters came out, he recorded everybody. He recorded everything and everybody. He got up in the morning. He was on the phone all the time. He recorded those. He recorded with a taxi cab having lunch. He wouldn't tell you, but he'd record everything. And those 3,400 tapes are at the Warhol Foundation. They're fragile tapes, and it's the richest arts foundation in the world. In close to 40 years, they have not digitalized them. They don't want people to see these things because as one of them told me, they're full of sex, drugs, and violence. But the curator at the Andy Warhol Museum gave me the transcripts for the period of my book. So that's why the book is so intimate. I mean, people can't challenge what I'm writing there. It's totally based on the transcripts.
So the museum had this rule that said you can't listen to the tapes, but it didn't actually have a rule that
No,
said
the foundation is in New York, okay, and they agreed to let me listen to about three of them, okay, and I had to pay to have them digitalized. They're the richest foundation, the arts foundation in the history of the world. I had to pay $1,000 to have these two or three of these things transcribed, and digitalized. And then I went to spend a week in Pittsburgh. The tapes are being kept at the Warhol Museum, this wonderful museum in Pittsburgh. So I went there, and I had to sign something. This is unbelievable. You had to sign this thing where you couldn't take any notes. If you wanted to take any notes, you had to go in another room. You could take your notes, and when you finished taking notes and left, you had to give them a copy of the notes. I mean, they wouldn't do that in the Soviet Union. Anyway, I'm sort of so depressed and disgusted with wasting $1,000 and wasting my time. And in the middle of the week, Matt Gray, who's the curator, comes up and shows me over on this table these boxes full of the transcripts of my period. Now, why he did that, how he did that, is beyond me. But that was a crucial part of my book.
I'd like to talk to you about a really powerful financial planning tool to help you make smart retirement and other critical financial decisions. It's a tool that factors in all your financial data and shows you what you can sustainably spend every year for the rest of your life. That tool is my software company's Maxify Planner. It's incredibly powerful, it's accurate, and it's easy to use. Maxify takes the guesswork out of financial decisions at every stage of life. Its focus is on raising, de-risking, and sustaining your living standard. Maxify lets you run what-if scenarios to see how your finances will change in taking new jobs, buying a home, doing Roth conversions, retiring early, downsizing, investing more in the market, you name it. Knowing the impact of these decisions before you make them is the secret to making smarter decisions. And it's also the secret to what we all seek, which is financial peace of mind. So please visit Maxify.com today to start planning. That's Maxify with an I, Maxify.com, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast. So this foundation had a rule that you couldn't listen to the tapes, but it didn't have a rule that you couldn't read the transcripts. So you eventually were able just to read the transcripts and see what's in the tapes. And that was, it's kind of remarkable about the nature of bureaucracy that they have.
And that's called bad lawyering.
Exactly. So you have thousands of tapes upon which this whole thing is written. What's your impression of Warhol as a person? What was his what was motivating and what's he like?
He was a voyeur. He was one strange guy. He manipulated everyone and everything.
He did what?
Look, we're all calculating to an extent, right? I'm calculating sometimes, so are you. But not all day long, not every moment of our life. And he was calculating from the moment he woke up until he went to bed. Everything was calculation.
So every meeting,
Just calculate. He used people. And I'm surprised that there hasn't been an outrage about this book, because it totally challenges the perceived wisdom of this guy.
so there's the guy himself, whether he's in some sense, a weirdo or a strange person, or just damaged people because he didn't really care for them. Fundamentally, was going to use and discard person. So there's the Warhol, but then there's the Warhol as the artist, and you're challenging both things. You're saying that the artwork itself is not what everybody thinks, and this foundation.
I'm very careful in my book not to say that directly, because I'm not an art critic, okay? But I think so many art critics are total frauds, okay? They're brilliant art critics. I mean, there's a guy that, I'm trying to give his name, did a review of Warhol in the New York Review of Books. Just brilliant, making so many of these points that I'm making, okay? So I'm not alone in saying this, but we're definitely in a distinct minority.
I see. But the economic issue here is that if Warhol is not viewed as a reasonable human being, then the value of his art drops. And then if his work itself is not viewed as being done by him necessarily, or that comes into question, who actually did the work, and B, was done by a process that takes 2 hours in some cases and is selling for $195 million, then we're talking about that entire bubble being burst. And that's part of what this book is about. It's about potentially bursting an enormous bubble.
Right. But if I have a $50 million Warhol on my living room wall, I don't think I'm going to like this book.
Right. So have people talked to you about that? I mean,
No, I mean, it's funny because I'm doing this event at Rizzoli's on May 11th, Monday evening. And
that's a bookstore. What is that?
it's a bookstore in New York.
Yeah.
And Eric Shiner, who was the head of the Warhol Museum, is going to be there, and we're going to have a discussion. He loved the book, and I thought, gosh, it was so daring of him, having been at but he knows what I'm telling you is the truth.
And so, what do you expect him to say about about this?
Hair shine, or what he's going to say?
Yeah.
I know what he said. It's on the back of my book. Andy Warhol loved to surround himself with intriguing women and drama in equal measure, and Lawrence Lamer artfully reveals how these two obsessions often crashed into one another with brutal force in this new tour de force book.
Well, that's pretty strong. But does the book, I mean, by the way, he died about age 60 or so. I just double checked. So he didn't die. He died relatively young. Do you think?
Right, in a botched operation.
Okay. So it wasn't connected to drugs or anything like that or history of that.
No, no.
It was just an operation that went south. Um, does your book really raise these questions about the economic value of his work? I mean,
Implicitly, you have to read it and you have to think that, right? You have to conclude that. What are we talking about here?
I see. And does this carry over to lots of art? I mean, if we talk about Rothko, some people would look at a Rothko and say, well, it's got one color up on the top and one color at the bottom, and one uh, combination of colors, and that I could have done something similar. My third grader could have done something similar. Other people would say this is a masterpiece, and so talk about this as a general proposition. Are you kind of
Look,
raising the issue of whether modern art, a lot of it is just not not showing real skill, that this is it's like somebody a plagiar, it's like in academia, of which I'm very familiar, it would be saying this this book that is a bestseller and a global bestseller and is bringing in to the author millions and millions of dollars a year, and the author is on every uh, magazine and media outlet and TV show and Oprah Winfrey book club, and it's plagiarized. That would be the takedown that we're talking about in academia. Is this analogous?
not perfectly, but I think, look, we Americans are the most insecure people in the world. Every American I've ever met is insecure, and this takes advantage of that. Gee, I don't really know what art is. I'm not an expert on that, so that must be art because these people tell me it's art. The problem with the famous story about the emperor has no clothes, where the little boy stands there and he sees the emperor about go back naked, and he shouts out, "The emperor has no clothes." In our society, that poor little kid, the emperor's minions would pick him up and beat him up and throw him out in the alley.
Right. Everybody needs to read Hans Christian Andersen's The Emperor's New Clothes. It's a child's book, but it's really written for adults, and it's about this emperor who just, because a lot of people don't know that book, because I ask my undergraduates when I'm teaching economics, and it comes up, the same issue comes up. Do you know this book? And they don't. And a lot of them from around the world. And this podcast goes to people all over the world. And the story is an emperor is very super vain, and he hires three tailors to make him the most beautiful clothes in the world, and they can't come up with anything. So they decide to make nothing and undress him and pretend to be dressing him. And and then just say, oh, this is so beautiful. And all his entourage, all his, his vice president and his cabinet secretaries, and by analogy, and his military, they're all saying, oh, it's beautiful. And he's absolutely naked. And then he goes and parades to show the people in the town his beautiful clothes. And this little boy screams in the middle, shouts out, but he's naked. And there's a hush, and he stops, the emperor stops for a moment, and the complete silence. And the emperor then continues to march, and everybody starts clapping and shouting how beautiful the clothes are. And that's how the book ends. So revealing the truth doesn't necessarily reveal the truth in the sense of, or change the truth.
Yeah, I was just watching television. I saw Donald Trump naked, and I decided I better not say anything.
Exactly. Right. Well, yeah, and we have craziness. I mean, I was just reading CNN that we're going to read. He wants to, the latest thing is eliminate the income tax, I guess all federal taxes in favor of tariffs. With that, that idea is so preposterous just in terms of addition in dollars and cents. If you tried to do that, you presumably put tariffs sky high, and then we'd have an embargo and we'd have no tariff revenue, we'd have no income tax revenue, and we'd have no government. I mean, this is that has no close, but it's right there on the top of, CNN, as if it's actually worth reading about, as opposed to saying, is this guy ready to be institutionalized? That should be the question. But I think our answer would be yes, and quite a while ago. But anyway, Larry, we're kind of drawing to a close. Tell us anything we haven't spoken about the book, about just the writing process, about anything on your mind, really, to bring us to the top of the hour here.
Well, I was very fortunate in the material I got because I had those transcripts and I had the material from Gene Stein at the New York Public Library, and I'm 83 years old, and I'm very fortunate to be doing this. I love my brother so much, who died recently. He was a brilliant economist, and I'm very happy just to be going on doing what I'm doing, and I'm very happy I have great old friends like you, Larry.
Well, very grateful for Ed, who was my lifetime friend and uh, taught me so much and taught the profession so much. Uh, and uh, and then he introduced me to you, which was like fabulous icing on top of the cake. And
Let me just say one more thing, okay? You put together this Zoom for my brother, okay? In which you had these three Nobel Prize winners, and it was at the end of it is the last possible week it could be where he could understand what was going on, okay? So he sat there for the 2 hours and listened to these talks, these brilliant economists, not talking down. I mean, I couldn't understand part of it, okay, but not talking down, talking on his level. I'm telling you, Larry, I swear to you, I'm not exaggerating. In his life, that's the greatest gift anybody ever gave him.
well, I don't want to start crying, so I'm gonna say goodbye. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay, bye bye.